we're kind of using this boolean in a different way. It's still technically valid. We're not setting it to true and then checking for false, but we're checking for false down here to see if we set it to true. So we're still checking to see if this is a false condition and a valid false condition, instead of doing like a true then to a false. So it still remains, you know, the boolean still goes from false to true, which I think is a proper use of it. We're just now checking to see if it was set to true or not, and if not, we're doing something. So we're just changing our methodology slightly. Now, why are we doing this? So, when we're just doing that configuration, I was thinking, well, if we are passing through the index for the dialog we want to show still to this function, then what's the point of using conditional the switches as conditions, right? Because in order to know which index to send, we'd have to check the switches beforehand to then know that the dialog we want to use is valid, right? So what we want to do is we want to essentially allow us to set up an NPC that uses one page, and that one page calls this function, and this function determines what dialog to show, and it's up to it to determine what dialog to show based on the switch conditions. So instead of having like a page for each set of switch conditions that should show different dialog, we're now saying one page, no conditions, and then the switch conditions themselves will be used here to determine what is shown on that NPC page. So in order for that to work, though, we can't use the ID anymore, the index anymore. The index is no longer a valid parameter for this. Instead, we just check to see if the map is the current map and is a valid map ID, if the NPC is on the map and is a valid NPC ID, and then from there, if the NPC has dialog objects associated with it in the data, then we loop those objects, we pull out the condition list. If the condition list matches, if all the conditions in the condition list are true, then the first one we find that's like that, we use. Now, problem with that is that if you don't unset conditions as you're going through the game, you're going to run into a situation where the first thing that's true is still going to be the first thing that's true, because if you build on switches, so you have switches you turn to true, then more switches you put to true, then more switches you put to true as you're progressing through the story of the game, and you're not turning things off because whatever reason, then that's going to be a problem here, because those switches that evaluated to true in the first place are still true. So I'm not sure how to handle that, other than that if we check the list in reverse order. I think there's a reverse function. Let's see. So I think filters based on the order of the lists that you give it. It's not like a random sort kind of thing. It doesn't randomly pick things from the list. It goes through the order from, you know, element 0 to element, the last element. Reverse. Okay. So like we're doing with the event pages, like event pages are evaluated from right to left, we have to evaluate the switch from this condition list, or at least the object list, from right to left as well. And there's also a typo I missed, because we want to say, is the last dialog option valid now? If not, is the next one before it valid? Is the one before that valid? Until we reach the one that is valid. Because if we don't do that, we're going to run into a situation like we do with pages, where if you have a default page that has no conditions on it as the last page, that page will always be the one that's used for processing the event, because it's always going to be true. None of the other stuff will matter. Likewise with this, the same thing is true. So the first dialog option should be your default one that shows initially, with none of the other conditions for any of the other things being true, and then each other dialog option should be based upon the conditions should be based upon that they happen after the conditions that made the preceding dialog be shown. So we have to reverse the list order. We're not going to change the data itself. We're just going to use a function to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this condition list and we're going to use reverse the game switch data basically. So we're going to say let's game switches equal game switches data dot reverse. And then we're going to use game switches instead of game switches data on the filter to get the reversed order of those to then go through these in reverse order. So what should now happen is that we should deal with any situations where conditions that are still true prevent the next dialog from showing because we're checking them in reverse order. Again, so that's one of the quirks of RPG Maker that if you didn't know about, you would never understand why they didn't work properly. This wouldn't work properly. It's because of that situation. Do we need to make any other changes aside from removing the third parameter here? I don't think so. Everything else still looks fine. We're checking the length there. Technically, we don't even need to check the length. We can just do this. But we need to check the length to get the else condition, right? Otherwise, this just doesn't do anything, and we want to display the default otherwise. Or actually, you know what? No, I am wrong. We actually don't care, because we're using a false, or if we're using the for loop will just not process, so the thing will still be false if it doesn't get processed. So let's talk about break. So this is less complicated and does the same thing, which is good. So this is a new command, I think. We might have talked about it before in episode 3, but we're going to recover it again because it's been a little bit of time. So what break does in a for loop, it essentially says, I have found what I wanted to find, stop processing over the data. So it's a performance thing. So if you find what you need to find, you don't need to keep looping through your data, so you can stop the for loop at that point. Now if you want to go the other way around, you say if I find something I want to continue until I find a specific thing that matches other conditions, you can use continue, which is just continue. Continue essentially says at this point we've found what we're looking for, go to the next item. We don't need to continue processing the code in this iteration of the loop. This is a different type of performance thing. So if you have like a lot of code that your for loop does, and if you hit a specific point, let's say you're doing some checking and you still have to process every item in the for loop, but if you have certain conditions, it means that the item you're looking at isn't valid for what you're doing. Then you can use a continue on that if check to say skip the rest of what's going on in this current iteration and go to the next iteration of the loop. So those are two really important things to know, commands to know for loops. And they work for any type of for loop. In this case we want to break because we found the condition that's true, or the dialog that has the true conditions, and we have our dialog to use. So we'll go ahead and save that. We'll go ahead and we fixed that typo too. So actually this should now actually work potentially. So that doesn't change anything for this though. I had the thing up too, so well, hopefully it was in the right position that it was showing correctly. Most of the stuff. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and set up this next one. So what I want to do with this is, we're going to make this one a little bit different. This is going to be a variable, or a switch we're going to use when we turn on and off the system to essentially track the state, if it's true or false. And if it's on, we're going to have this NPC turning off the dialog system. So the first one, the default one, is going to be I hit the dialog system and turn it off. This one's going to be, actually let's do it the other way around. I think that the initial should be something different, and then this one should be the one if it's true or not. So we're going to call this dialog system enabled. So I hate dialog systems, so nobody ever. It's going to be the Karen NPC. And then in this one we're going to do that text we just had, which was to turn it off. So if it's ever turned on, it'll show this text, the thing will turn it off. So we'll put another check in the event page if this is true to turn it off. And then when it's turned off, we'll show this other one on this one. So I'll show you like a complex way you can use this. Okay. There's our NPCs for map 1. Again, we're not going to put the third NPC in there because we don't want that to be in the system. Now, map 2. Map 2, we're going to have more of a interesting use of this. We're going to actually we're going to essentially ping off the different NPCs. And this is a weird kind of, it's going to be a little bit weird for this because of how we're going to handle the switch changing. Again, this is not meant to be a practical plugin. It's meant to be the proof of concept that a version of this that is practical can be done. So if you're planning to use this plugin in your game, just know that you're going to have to make changes to it to make it work properly. It's not meant to work in a realistic way at the moment. So, map 2, NPC list. We have 2 NPCs there. So there's the first NPC, default dialogue, no conditions dialogue. It's going to be. We're also going to do the end thing here and see if that actually works. We're going to give the other NPC a name here. Let's also add word wrap. And then we're going to add another one of these conditions. Going to be that. Let's say Gabby1 is turned on. And then we're going to send the dialog here. Alright, so there's those for this. We're going to put in the other NPC, NPC2. Going to be this Gabby NPC. So for the first dialogue, this one's going to have 3 different dialogue things in here. So the first one's going to be. So if you talk to this NPC, before you talk to the other one, it'll have this dialogue. Otherwise, you're going to have the other dialogue, which will then pick off a trigger off a series of exchanges on dialogue. So we're going to call this other NPC Linda. So Linda1. Then we'll need another dialogue here. So condition will be Linda2. Actually, I'm going to do one more, and we'll do a third one on the other one. Because I want to have some dialogue that happens after all this as well. I'm just going to create this one, so now we're already know we're going to need it. So Gabby2. And then Linda3. And then we're going to go back to the first one. We're going to add in another one of these. Switch is going to be on Gabby2. So those have been configured now. Okay, apply. Okay. So we're going to do a test on this. If the system is enabled, we're going to do this, have that. We're going to do a self switch. So what we should get from this is we should see that unconfigured message show up on this one for the first one, because we're not going to configure NPC3 into the data. Now let's see over here. So we gotta change how this is kind of set up. So I'm going to keep this one on the game system script call because I want to keep that there. It's valid to do that. The other one, because we're using the switch. Now, if we were using the advanced switches, we could set up an advanced switch to be true or false based on this. But we're not using that plugin, so we're not going to do that. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to keep this. We're going to change that to remove the index. Then on the else, we'll keep this here. Turn this off. Now, this is going to be the interesting part. So, actually, no, I think these two are pretty simple. It's the other ones we have to worry about. Let me go check and make sure. I don't think we did the split dialogue on those. Oh, actually, no, yeah, we did. Never mind. Okay, we did do that. So a more interesting way of handling this. So we're gonna go to condition branch rather. We're gonna look at dialog 1, or MPC 1, dialog 2. If that's turned off, then we're going to turn it on here. I mean, we don't necessarily need the conditional branch though. Actually, we can just do this. What we'll need the conditional branch for is a little bit later on, potentially. We'll have to set up the pages a bit different for the other NPCs in map 2, because those are going to be... In order to make it work properly, we'll need to... Well, we'll see what we need to do. Well, we'll see. This can get a little bit messy. There's no way around that, I don't think. Something like envisioning how that's going to work. This one should be fine on the one page. You know, this gets turned on, then we have the second line of text. If this system is turned off, it's going to have this stuff. So that should be fine. Okay, so those ones are fine. Now, actually, no, wait. I need to modify this. All right, so we're also going to get rid of this check. Well, this is kind of a bad example. We don't actually have a thing in here where we're saying if it's turned off not to do stuff, right? Yeah, so we're not actually disabling anything with this. We're essentially using this as a script call to do stuff in the events themselves. So in this case, and I still have the stuff open, that's fine. These two things are on still. But in this case, I think that's fine because this one we're going to... on this one we're going to have the dialog be different whether it's on or off, right? So let's pull the internal things out of this if block and take that out. So 1, 2. Then what we're going to say is if the system is on, let me actually redo this so I'm just going to do this more easily. Or rather, we need to make this be true, so we need to change the name of this. That was a miss there. Okay, let's turn that on. And then get rid of that. So, Dialog Selector, do our thing. If this is true, or this is false because the dialog system is on, then it'll show the first option, like the option that has no conditions, and then disable the system. Then if we talk to her again, it'll show the second thing of text, which will have or no, it'll show the second, then it'll show the first if this is turned off, or if this is turned on. So if disabled is true, it'll show the first thing of dialog that has no conditions. Or no. If system is enabled, no, I was correct. I just didn't think, how is this supposed to be implemented? Alright, so if this is enabled, and we'll need to have a thing to turn this on by default. But if this is enabled, then because this will be enabled, this will be true. It's going to show on disabling the system, turn it off. We talk to it again, it'll show the first line of first dialog for the NPC because it's turned off. And we turn it back on again, it'll go through this again. So in this case, this should turn it off. That way the second condition doesn't show. Alright, so that takes care of that. We'll leave this the way it is. And then this one, when we turn it back on, we need to turn switch 2 back on. Was it before the text? Okay, now this one is done. Let's save that. Now this one is a little more interesting. So, we need to... We'll keep the enabled thing as there. We'll take this off. This one's a bit more interesting. So, now, we need a conditional block here. What's going to happen is we need to go through and look at the Gabby switches. And, let me see. So we talked to her initially, we turn on Linda 1. If Gabby 1 is turned on, we turn on Linda 2. If Gabby 2 is on, we turn on Linda 3. So we need to check to see, yeah, the Gabby switches. So check for that one. We have an else condition. We nest another one inside of there. This is going to be Gabby 2. And then Gabby 2 is going to have no else because that's the bottom of the chain. This else is going to be that one that handles the default one. So for this one, we're going to turn on Linda 1. For Gabby 1, actually take that back. Now there is going to be an else here because if Gabby 2 is not on, but Gabby 1 is on, we need to turn on Linda 2. And if Gabby 2 is on, then we need to turn on Linda 3. And then this is, I think, configured now. This is set up properly. Let's change this, though. So, initial dialogue. Gabby 1 is off, so turn on Linda 1. Go talk to Gabby. And then we're going to build the same thing over on Gabby. Let's go ahead and name these events. Since we give them names now, they should be named. Alright, so again, this will do what it does. We don't really care about that. It's what's after that that we care about. So we need another conditional branch here. So if Linda 1 is on, else. If Linda 2 is on, else. And we don't care about Linda 3. Linda 3 just sets up the last dialog for Gabby. But we don't have anything that Gabby does that would cause Linda's stuff to update, so we don't need to do we don't need to really turn on a switch in response to Linda 3. So we don't need to handle Linda 3 in here. So else on this though, we need to turn on Gabby 1. Or no, wait. This one's a little bit different because the first option, her first dialog is not related to this back and forth. So the first one has no else because we don't care about that. It's only when Linda 1 is on. Linda 1 turns on Gabby 1. So, That'll be the else on the 2. Turns on Gabby 1. And then Linda 2 turns on Gabby 2. Or rather, yeah, because that's we're saying the dialogue there for that. Because they have each other's stuff. So this should be good now as well. Okay. Let's actually see if this bloody works. Or not. Let's see. Game. Alright, we'll go talk to her first. Actually, this is turned off. The switch is turned off, so... Actually, I think I have it turned off anyway, too. Oh, dialog object list is not editable. Why? It should be a list of objects, right? That's interesting. Let's have a look at this. Something's not quite right there. Oh, I made a change to... We're talking about when things would be... when we changed stuff, right, and it wouldn't load properly because we changed the things. Well, here is a perfect example of... I made that change, I forgot that I made the change. And as a result of that, the the dialog list didn't load properly. Okay, that makes sense. Because remember when we were talking about the proper way to handle the dialog list in episode 5? Well, I forgot to change that back, and because the way we wrote it works the way it's supposed to, that didn't cause it to break. But now that we are actually using specific names for handling all this stuff, the specific key names, it did cause it to break because we need a specific key name that we set up differently. It looked like though that the data was correct. Yeah, so cool. So it actually did work then, yeah. It didn't. This didn't cause any issues, and parsed correctly. Actually, no, it didn't. Look at this. Actually, this conditional one with no conditions is still a string, not a list. So one thing we need to do then is we need to add in handling for if it's an empty thing. I guess we should probably also do it for an empty object as well. We're doing it for a property, or for a list. So there's one change there. So the thing I thought would be the problem, it wasn't the problem. The problem was the list that had nothing in it, which I didn't think would cause a problem. But it makes sense, given how that actually is written. Alright, let's have another look here and see what we've got. There we go, now they're both arrays. 0 and with one condition. Cool. Alright, so just going to close that. So we have that. We know it's disabled and turned on. Yes. Okay, it's turned on. Let's see now. Dialog object list is still not iterable. Again, this is interesting. Alright, let's put a breakpoint there. Alright, so what is this? Well, that was weird. It actually just bombed out right. It should have stopped here, but didn't. Well, that's interesting. Because we're on that line, it shouldn't have tried to evaluate that line while it was broken on that line. Strange. Alright, so what do we have from this then? Oh, because no, it's a find though, right? But why is dialog list still dialog list? Oh, because it's that way in the data and the whoops. Yeah, we need to update the we can't just update it there. That's a change to the plugin parameter, so we need to actually refresh. I don't think this, well, this might cause problem. Let me duplicate this. And we'll refresh this. This is a tip that you can use as well. If you have some, so if you have a plugin that you have a lot of configuration in and you want to try and save it, save the configuration if you're having to refresh or reload the plugin, you can actually just copy and paste C Control V the plugin into a new section, and it will copy over all the data for that plugin. So we're going to essentially have this as a backup in case the options get removed for the dialogue stuff, and we have to rebuild that. So I know what we did, because it's a distinct possibility that that might happen. Yeah, it did. Okay. So what I'm going to do then is we're going to go back over to here. It's a little bit of an annoying process, but we're going to essentially copy the data from the existing one over to the new one. Oh hell, it actually cleared it out of here too. Well, we'll have to reset it all up then. I wonder if that's because it was already changed in the process of doing that. Oh, it's the process of opening it. So actually, this is still. Okay, let's see if this works. So what we should be able to do is go into here, go into here, go into our NPCs, right? Then in the NPC data, we go to text. And then where we have this here, we replace it with what we copied from the text in the other section, right? Theoretically, I think we need to. Okay, that worked. That worked. We were missing the quotation at the end. Nice. Okay, that worked. So not quite straightforward, but. This is doable. We at least can save our configuration. So from open square to closing square. And then the outside of that for the Yeah, so it should be actually quotation to quotation. So that's what we need there. Now what we should really do is, we should change the, what we could do I think probably also is just change the parameter name. Potentially in here. This might be a better way to do it, actually. Just add the space here, right? Yeah, that works too. But if you did accidentally hit OK all the way back out and erased it, you'd have to do the copy paste thing for all of them. Like I said, you almost never want to work with this text tab if you can avoid it. Especially when you're dealing with structs or objects or whatever. Because this is the kind of crap you have to deal with. But sometimes it's not avoidable. Okay, those are all there. Those are all there. Alright. Okay. Okay. Apply, okay. Save that. Run it. Alright, so now we should have some different results. At least it won't fail because of that error that we're getting before. Interesting. So why isn't the unfly stuff taking over? Maybe it still doesn't process from inside a variable. Well, that's interesting. Oh. Oh, we did not. I don't think we put the thing to turn it back on. That makes sense. So actually, potentially that means that part is working for that NPC at least. Oh no, wait, that should have been turned back on over here. What the hell? Interesting. So, is the reverse not working? Is a question now. Let's go ahead and debug that function a bit more. Let's see what's going on internally. Well, it's empty because there's nothing there, so that's fine. Now, turn this back on. Oh. Interesting. So... Oh, okay. That's going to be a bit of a problem then. So, due to the way that this switch list works with the data, right? Now, how does it know then, right? Like if I then go in and say switch 3, how does it know? Interesting. Interesting. So then how does this... Let's see. What does the game do to handle switches then? There should be objects. I think. Value param. This is interesting. So this actually technically is a bug, right? Because switch, unless you turn on the first two switches, you actually set the value to something. It, being game switches, actually doesn't have them in there. So even though switch, not 3 but 2, interesting. So switches is actually a zero indexed list. So does that mean if I turn on... This is interesting. Let's do a test really fast here. So we're going to turn on control switches 3. This is an interesting conundrum here. I did not realize that the switch system worked this way. It says backwards as everything else with RPG Maker, so I'm not surprised it works this way. So wait, so in this case, how does it know? Okay, this is interesting, right? So now it did set 3 to true. This did set 3 to true. But when we run this before talking to this NPC, but see, it didn't work that way though, because it had still nothing there. The hell? Alright, let me refresh. This is very odd. Okay, this one works. So then... What was the problem then? Impressions. Was it not just was it not showing the default dialogue? Was that the problem? Ah, here we go. Oh, you know what it is? It was the reverse. Crap. It was the reverse. Reverse must remove empties. Here's a question. ES6. Okay, no, so we do it. So the spread operators. Okay, interesting. Interesting. Just follow along for a second here. I'll explain what I'm doing in a moment. Ah, cool. It is here. Okay, so let's explain this. So, there are a couple different ways to what's called merge an array, to merge a list. In other words, you take one list and you combine it with another. You could use, I think there's a merge command. There's also splicing, technically. There's a couple other things you can do. One other way that's really easy is called using the spread operator. So, these ellipses, these periods in this context are the spread operator. When you use them in front of an array, you're essentially saying that to take this expression and say that this is the same as having each element of this array printed out individually. So in other words, we're saying that we have 1, 2, 3, then a comma, then 4, 5, 6. So we're essentially building an array by extracting all the elements from each of these other two arrays and then concatenating the things together because it's we're working with the two different lists, right? So this would be 1 through 3. If we didn't have this list here, this thing here, it'll throw an error because it's not a, one, it's unexpected, but it's also not a valid list anymore. So what we can do with this is we can essentially create what's called an immutable list, an immutable array, essentially. To do that, we use a new type of variable, a complex variable type definition, which is called const or constant. A constant can't be changed once you make it. So, in our case, I don't think we need to change it, which is fine. So let me just try something here. I don't think this is gonna work technically. Okay, that does work. So, we've kind of got our own JS fiddle thing going on here. Now if I do test3.reverse. Okay, so the undefined is still there. So what is an empty then? Is an empty not technically undefined? Interesting. So here it's a null. Let me refresh. This is an interesting thing here. So we have an array that has empty. Our list has empty. So let's go back and see if we can find this. I think what I need to then say is reverse array with without removing empty index. I don't know if that's possible. So if I go in and I say game switches dot value 0, what do we get? False. What if I actually just go in and say underscore data 0, undefined? Because there's nothing there. Not that the index is undefined, but there's just nothing there to find. So it returns undefined. Because technically the index hasn't been initialized yet. Well, it has, but it hasn't been given an actual value. Or rather, I should say that we essentially did this. This is what it's doing. It's doing let test list 2. So it's doing this, and then test list 2 equals true. Yeah. So it's directly defining the index based on the switch. So the question is, how do we duplicate this, or how do we deal with this? Because we can't detect empties. I don't think. What if we made our own reverse function? Undefined. So if the value is undefined, we don't assign the index. So what I'm thinking is we do something like this. Because this reverse isn't going to work, because the way that this reverse function is coded is it correctly does not deal with that crap, right? So instead what we need to do is we have to make our own reverse function. To technically do the stupid thing. But that's what we have to do, because that's what Arbitrary Maker has done. Instead of just defining every switch that exists once you create it as being false until it's true, they just assign it once it's been assigned. I mean, I guess they did it to save on data, but at the same time, that's ridiculous. They set up the situation where a list is no longer a list, right? Where the list data that you have is no longer reliable. And it's actually, again, this is something that they do this a lot, where they break conventions and don't do what they're supposed to do. Once you create a switch in the data, when that data is loaded in when the game starts, that should create an element that's false, period. There's no reason not to. And the only reason I think that they did is because they were trying to not load it in case of mobile, which is stupid because most mobile devices will be able to handle it no matter what. So we're going to loop through game switches in reverse. This is going to be interesting because we have to do this backwards in so many ways. So this has to be an iterative loop. So let I1 equal game switches dot underscore data dot length. So if we go back to over here real fast, you'll see that our game data list here is, the length is 3, right? Because we have 2 empty elements and 1 that isn't. 0 and 1 and then 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to so while I1 is greater than 0, greater than or equal to 0. So that's the length. length minus 1. And we have to put a check in here to make sure that the length of game switch data is not 0. Because if we don't do that, we'll throw an error, potentially. So, length minus 1. So as long as I1 is greater than 0 or greater or equal to 0, because 0 should be the last element that we deal with, we're going to subtract 1 from I1. I1 minus minus. Alright. Now, for every loop through here, we're going to do a check to see if the value is undefined or not. So if, and actually what we probably should do is store this in a variable. Just for the sake of making this easier to work with. So switches I1 equals undefined. Doing a full-on strict type check, or strict comparison there. So if this is, then we're doing else. Or rather we should do this if it's not undefined, and then we just don't worry about the other indices. So if this index is not undefined, the new switch list I1 equals switches I1. And then we don't care what the... Oh wait, that's interesting to think about though. Because we need to reverse it, right? So that becomes a bit of a problem. Because we're using index here to check this, that the index is the right index we're looking for. If index is in these conditions. Because we only want to check the conditions that are relevant to this dialogue, right? Oof. So wait, if we're checking the conditions that are relevant to the dialogue that we're looking at, then the previous conditions don't matter. You know what? I think we're doing something that we actually don't need to worry about, because the conditions are specific to each dialogue option. But no, because we're not checking a specific dialogue option, we're checking them all, right? So actually what has to change is we have to reverse the dialogue list. That's what has to happen. The dialog list has to be, this has to be processed backwards. We're at the wrong place here. I'm still going to keep that game switches, because that makes sense. But it's the dialog list that we have to process backwards. And in this case, we don't really care about that, because reverse should work fine on this. So dialog object list equals dialog. I mean, I could just hit dot reverse on this, but well, that should work. Yeah, that should be fine. Okay, I don't think we need this at all. Yeah. Because now that I think about it, the thing that we're checking is the dialogue. Each dialogue has specific things, so what we should do is just check the dialogue backwards, because the dialogue has the conditions. We don't care about the conditions themselves, the switches, because that's based on what dialogue we're looking at. If we're looking at the dialogue from backwards to forwards, then that's gonna, you know, be checking the switches backwards to forwards too. Now here's an interesting conundrum though, right? Which is that if we can have empty elements then this check might not be relevant anymore, because if we turn on a switch that exists, well, I guess this still maybe does, I'm not sure. I think this is going to be, oh man, this is, let me see, let's go through this again. So if we enable a switch that is ahead of other switches, so if we turn a switch on that's ahead of other switches that have not been turned on or turned off yet, so they haven't been put into the data yet, those are empty. They still take up space on the index list. So once we do that, once we go through, we're looking at each index. The index should still be there because it exists in the list. It just doesn't have a value. So if the index exists, it gets included into conditions. If the condition list length matches conditions length, then that means that all the conditions are present. Then we check each condition and the conditions list in this conditions variable to see if the value of that is true. So if it's undefined, this will be false. If this is false, this will be false. If this is true, this will be true. So I think this still works even with the undefineds in there. I think. Unless, well, I think filter strips out the undefineds though too, right? So technically, I think that filter would return. So like, let's say we have multiple switches needed for a thing, right? Not just one. Let's say 2 switches needed for a dialog to be shown. Now, one of the conditions has not been set yet, but something after it or the one after it has, so it's undefined. We get to the index, it's going to look at that. The value of that index is going to be undefined, so I think it doesn't add it to the list, even if it matches the conditions. So technically, we just have one condition in here, and the length wouldn't match, so we'd skip it. So I think, like I said, either way, I think this is handled. Let's go ahead and try it. Like we've discussed all this stuff ad nauseum. We just need to go in and see what happens when we try and use it. But I think that, yeah, I think we were trying to reverse the wrong thing. Interesting, this is still not finding it properly. Alright, so our conditions are 0. Game switches are 3, with 2 being their condition list is 0. Interesting, so this didn't seem to reverse it. Wait, so how's this supposed to work then? Reverse, so 1, 2, 3, reverse it. 3, 2, 1. Reverse is destructive, changes the original array. Oh. Okay. Well, there's that then. We need to be aware of that. But it didn't seem to change this though. Reverse and let's see, reverse an array of objects. I mean, it's supposed to do that, but it's not doing that. I wonder if reverse is not part of the. When was this added? Oh, this is added in 26. No wonder. So reverse isn't a. Well, no, reverse worked. It actually called reverse. Oh. Okay, it is there. Native code. Okay, no, it works. No, it does work. Or at least it works in the browser. I'm not sure if it works in here, though. It doesn't seem to work on this, though. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it does. It's just that it changes the original value, so it's not assigning a thing. So in this case, I think what we need to do then is we need to essentially create a copy of this. So actually, we have to do what I was doing before, but for a different reason. And then we'd say dialog object list dot reverse. Now, here's the question though: is this going to, by reference, alter this, or will it not? That'll be a thing we'll need to take a look at. So, currently we have this. Currently we have this. So we continue. Look at this now. Oh, it did. Yeah, it changed the original data. So we're going to have to break the reference on that. So what breaking the reference is, it's essentially taking an object, stringifying it, and then parsing it again. And by doing that, you prevent it from being able to be modified by the thing you're assigning it to. So for example, like right here, we assign our dialog list to this variable, then we're doing this on this variable, the reverse. Because this is technically still connected by a reference to our NPC data from here, anything we do to this is going to alter the NPC data here. So we have to break the reference between this and this object, or this variable. So to do that, we have to do object.parse. Not object, JSON.parse. And then JSON.stringify. So that when we make that reverse call, it's not going to change our map data. So now if we do this, and we go down past that, we look at this now. Our dialog list is still in the proper order, but our options list is in the new order that we want it to be in. Okay, so that's good. Now I'll talk to this NPC, enable it, and turn this on. So this is still not matching though. So our conditions for this, so 2 condition lists. Game switches to, oh, because it's a string, right? Versus an integer. So is there a fast way to do this? So we'll need to use the map function. Okay, we talked about this a bit earlier. That's an actual function in JavaScript. So here's what we need to do. We need to essentially Okay, map. Now from here we need to do a function definition. Because this is going to be a callback function. So what a callback function is, it's a function that gets run in response to another in response to something that another function does. So a function does something and then it runs a callback function on that thing it's done. So in this case, map iterates over a list, and then for each item it pulls out of the list, it does something. So we're going to make this function to do that. So we're going to have the elements, we're going to use the function notation to make this a bit easier to read. And essentially what we're going to say is return number element. So essentially we're going to cast this from whatever type it is into a number. And again, since these are going to be IDs, and we know they're always going to be IDs, we don't have to worry about checking to make sure they're actual numbers in this case. So now, let's see if this works. Do I have to worry about this anywhere else? Conditions, index, no. I think we're good. Okay, go ahead and turn that on. Then we'll go over to here. So now condition list has a value because we have, we were able to now pull it out because now this is, condition list now is a, an array of integers instead of an array of strings. So that gets us our condition. So now we go down to here. Go down to the next line. This should be, that should have the 1 in there, which is true. So conditions length is 1. True conditions length is 1. So this should be the proper dialog selection here. Nice. Okay, it's working now. Cool. So, test number 2. What happens with this NPC? Oh, you know what? I wonder if I have... Let me turn this off real fast. Okay, I didn't turn on word wrapping. Let me turn it on and see what happens. Manual line breaks, tight wrapping, for message, face stuff. We're using the face thing. So, what do we have now? Put this back on. So let's see what we have now. So the system isn't on, so it's not running. That's fine. Turn this on. That's actually part of the test, just to make sure that still worked the way it was supposed to. Okay, interesting. So the word wrap thing is here, but it is wrapping still. I thought we could use this. Maybe I need to have, maybe it's a different way of putting this in. Haven't used this in a while. Or line break in the code. Oh, does that have to have a slash in front of it? Because there's supposed to be a way you can actually just turn on word wrapping. Oh, it's capital wrap. That's why. So let's turn off the default wrapping. This does everything, right? So let's turn this off. So it's line break or BR though. So we might actually still be able to do this the way we want to do it. The way we want to do it. So I'm going to go over to here, we're going to capitalize the wrap, and then where we have this n/n here for new line, we're going to put in BR instead. Alright, see if this works. If it does, we're going to update all the other lines of dialogue, and then we'll go through the full testing. Ugh. Okay, so how's that supposed to work now? Let me go check message core's page here. Disables line break parsing. Keep in mind word wrapping is also a message, however. Enable word wrapping extends past window size will automatically be moved to the next line. but there's a way to make it happen, to do that but not have to enable it for every window. I wonder if that's one of the extension plugins. No. Interesting. So that only so it's only if we enable it, and then we can't control if it actually happens in the window or not. I thought there was a way to control it per window. Like for text box. It's only for descriptions, I guess. Other places like to have wrapping such as item descriptions, insert, word wrap, to get to enable it. Okay. So, with that in mind, let's turn off this for one. Okay, so we have to have this on all the time. Now, for the map 2 stuff, though, we need to look at that for sure. Actually, what I'm going to do with this, since I think this is going to work, I want to make this be 3, because I want to make this go to a new window. So I want to see if that'll work. And that will just let it go all the way, wrap around. Alright, so back up to here, we're going to turn back on word wrapping. So let's see if all this stuff is working or not. Turn that off. Yeah, it doesn't go, which is good because it's off currently. Turn it on, yes. Okay, turn it back on. Interesting, BR isn't working still. Even though message core says it should. That's interesting. I wonder if it's because it's inside of a variable. I wonder if that's still a problem. Let me try something here. So I'm coming back to the fact that maybe this being in the variable is a problem. We'll need to do something to make it work right. No, it doesn't matter. Okay. So, let me see. Unless we can use the /n. Let's try this. If I have to do it this way, it'd be kind of unfortunate because that's an extra step you'll need to use to do this. Either we have to make a modification to Yanfly's plugin or Metricore plugin or to the engine to process what's inside a game. So what happens is because we're using a game variable text code, it doesn't reprocess, doesn't re-render, doesn't rerun the what's in the game variable through the process again to see if there's anything else to process. So it's just spitting out what's in there without actually going through and replacing all the special characters in the string that's in the game variable. Well, that didn't work. Okay, yeah, so to make this work, we'll have to do something specific. However, you can see that this is actually working now. But yes, it's not going to process the BRs either. I actually closed this. Let's just go check the other functionalities working. It won't look the right way because the new lines are not working at the moment. But we can actually check to make sure the functionality still works now. And I'll have to work on the line break thing on my own time. Interesting. Nothing happened there. We got an error or no errors. noticed both of these, we're not getting anything. That's interesting. Wonder why. Wow, it's not even like... Oh, it's turned off. Duh. Okay, that makes sense. So, talk to her first. No. What is going on? But why does this keep getting turned off? Oh wait, does one of these guys have a auto page on him? What's going on here? Oh, you know what it is? It's the same issue with the other thing. We're having this happen multiple times, and it's resetting it to false because the default in the plugin settings is false. So we're actually resetting it to false on each new map, which means if we don't turn it back on every map, we got a problem. So we need to make sure that we only do that on the initial load. Yeah, did not catch that either. Normally I might like just re-record this because we're getting pretty long now, but it's actually a good thing to show the entire process here. And all the in-between stuff too. Okay, now let's see if we get something out of this NPC. Okay, so that's what it should be. Now if we talk to her... Now if we talk to her again, it shouldn't do anything different. It should be the same thing. Yep, okay, good. Now if we talk to Gabby. Good. I think it'd be working. Just gonna make sure to double confirm each time. So this does rely on some pretty complex eventing though. To make this work. So it's not exactly plug and play, but Grumble. And then this one should be the herb thing. Nice. So in theory, and in at least this proof of concept, the system works. We got some problems to figure out for showing new lines and stuff like that in the dialogue, but in theory, the system as it is works. When you don't consider the Yanfly stuff. Works as designed with that, even with that Yanfly's plugin being enabled, because we just enabled the Yanfly's plugin to try and handle all the new line stuff and word wrapping. So there you go. Plugin works. We had some things we had to go through and fix and change and rethink about because there were situations that I had not anticipated, like the fact that the bloody thing doesn't actually set up the switch list correctly. So you gotta like think about, you gotta go through, and when you're debugging these kinds of things, you gotta put a lot of thought into exactly why is something not working, as opposed to how do I make it work. Because if you go from the standpoint of it's not working, how do I make it work, you can do a lot of things to make it work. But chances are you're not going to pick the one thing that actually will make it work the way it's supposed to, which is to examine why isn't it working. And then once you find out the why, you can implement the correct how to make it work. That'll be it for this video. So we're done with this plugin now. This is the final version of this plugin for the series here. So this will be up on the GitHub. We'll tackle the dialogue or the documentation on video 7 because episode 7 because That one's not going to be too long. We're just going to be setting up a basic core plugin and talking about why you want a core plugin. Because we don't really have enough stuff yet built out through these plugins to make a real episode out of it on its own. And we're going to be updating that core plugin as we go through and work on the other plugins throughout the series as well. So yeah, we'll work on the documentation in episode 7. This has gotten a bit long. We're pushing the limits of the 3-episode structure at the moment. So I think we're at 4 hours, potentially an hour or something. I don't know, something crazy like that. But yeah, so thanks for watching. Comments, questions, link below. Appreciate it. And I'll catch you guys in episode 7, where we're going to talk about what a core plugin is and do the documentation for this plugin. But until then, it's LMP Games, and I will catch you guys later.